Where were you? Don't worry, we've got you covered. This is how things unfolded when the Speaker gave his long-awaited ruling on what is to be the fate of 4 members of Parliament who have found themselves representing something other than what they represented when they were voted into Parliament. Let's hear some excerpts of how it all went down yesterday.
When voters elect a candidate, they do so based not only on the individual's personal qualities, but also on the political party platform they represent. Party switching or defection, therefore, can be seen as a breach of the mandate and social contract between the Member of Parliament and the electorate. Accordingly, I proceed to inform the House the Members of Parliament have by their action vacated their seats in Parliament.
We have the working majority. Beginning the next parliamentary sitting, we'll begin the process to take over as the majority caucus of this parliament.
The majority caucus immediately are boycotting Parliament until this matter is determined by the Supreme Court.
The report I am hearing is that the Speaker has declared 4 seats vacant. So for me, God is even showing a sign of what is going to happen. Because even before we have cast one single ballot, the NDC has become the majority.
Right, Kwaku, of course, I mean, you were in the thick of things as they unfolded yesterday. Now the question is, I mean, what happens next? So they've adjourned until Tuesday, right? Yeah. That gives some time for certain things, decisions to be made, right? What will be, the question on my mind is, who will be the leader of government business?
Yeah. So the standing orders, now the Parliament has adopted a new standing orders, and it's pretty clear. It deals with a number of these. The leader of government business is the person appointed by the government to lead his government in business. So, in fact, the leader of government business can be somebody different than if, let's say, the NPP had majority and Afenyo Makin is still the majority leader. The NPP could have appointed Obi Amwa as the leader of government business, or say Mensa Bonsu as my leader of government business. That person leads government business because there's a real possibility, given what we've seen with this Parliament, that the next Parliament or the other Parliament, that the party that will win the executive will come short in Parliament. So you cannot appoint the opposition party who perhaps will be having the majority in Parliament to be leading your government business. So the standing orders has quite clearly defined all those rules now as the person that is appointed by the president or the head of the executive, whoever that person might be, to lead their business in Parliament. That is what the interpretation schedule means. And normally the procedure has been, the precedent has been that the majority leader, because since 1992 we've always had situations where the majority in Parliament has the same party as the executive. Precisely. So the majority leader has always been the leader of government business.
Now here's what's interesting. Now that they are the party in the minority, what business can they lead?
The only business perhaps they can hope to really get anything on is the ones that come with secret voting. So there are 2 Supreme Court nominees that are currently on the table, and the minority have been stonewalling that for days because at some part they don't trust their own membership. For the 3-4 times that Parliament has had a secret ballot on nominees in Parliament, some NDC MPs have voted secretly to join the NPP colleagues to approve those persons. So when it comes to those ones, the minority, the new majority now, have some case to be apprehensive about that. But when it comes to those business that you have to stand and be counted, we know that in Ghanaian politics, very few people are willing to stand up to be counted, like Joe Manchin in the US, for instance, where you can say that I'm not for this, even though I'm a Democrat, right? So when it comes here, there are very few things that the MPP are going to get through, and they have very, very, very key business that MPP have been seeking to get Parliament to approve. There is the matter of about $350 million worth of tax waivers. One of the reasons why that has not passed is because the minority had been blocking it. And the majority were struggling to get all 138 of their colleagues to support that. We know Kwaku has been opposed to that.
Yeah.
So even he has made it clear that he has his own issues. So whenever these matters come to the floor, Kwaku has not been in Parliament. So when it came to that, you were short by one. And when it comes to that, it's not a secret vote. It's by voice, and if you call for division or head count, then people will stand in their caucuses and vote for or against it. And already you are in fact, that was part of the business the government wanted to do at the emergency recall of the House last month. They couldn't get it because Cynthia Morrison, who was already peeved with the party, was not coming to Parliament. So they lost that. At some point, Kwaku was also not there for those 2 day sittings. So even though they were majority at the time, they were majority in name only, because they didn't have people on the floor to be able to push this. But now you also don't have it. But technically, what it will also mean is that the minority side could chair the business committee. The new majority, led by Atoforson, could chair the new business committee. And the business committee programs the business for the week. They say that, okay, listen, let's bring these tax waivers to the floor on Tuesday or Wednesday. Atoforson says, I don't want this 3 years ago. So what are the chances that you get to convince him now that the stakes are high, going to an election, political parties are taking even more entrenched positions? What are the chances that you get that? There's also $250 million worth of loan the government is hoping to get to stabilize the economy. The city is on a free fall mode. When you get this $250 million, the next 2 months, it stabilize things. For the energy sector recovery loan program. That has been passed by a slim majority. But there's also the financial sector recovery. $250 million loan is still sitting on the table. And the minority had raised some issues with it. Down to the majority. I'm struggling. The minority. I
know, it's crazy, right? I don't know whether
we've known them as majority since the start.
The opposition, now the majority, right? Crazy.
So yeah, so that $250 million is also a subject for discussion. It's still on the table. So when it comes to real business in Parliament, between now and when Parliament adjourns, they are expected to sit around 4 weeks and go and do the election. If they need to come back, they will come back. If not, they will wait in their houses and their constituencies until the midnight of 7 January for the 8th Parliament to be dissolved, the new Parliament sworn in. And that is why the government side knows that. And that's why Afenyo Makin says, we are not coming to Parliament again until the Supreme Court determines this matter. And the matter that was filed by the minority leader now, Afenyo Makin, there's no return date. As in, the Supreme Court has not set a date to deal with it. In the writ, the endorsement is that it will be set, the date will be set after 14 days when all the other parties file. After 14 days takes you close to about 10 days for Parliament to adjourn any date. And then when the parties file, they could get about 7 days again for hearing notice to be filed and all that. That could well take you out of this Parliament. So I suspect between now and Monday, what the majority side will be seeking to do will be to get the house in order, come back and take the house. But the NPP side will be getting the Supreme Court perhaps to expedite hearing on this matter. Whether or not they will succeed is a matter that the Supreme Court will decide on. But the minority now, the new majority, NDC, they will have to appoint from one of their own a second deputy speaker. And names have already been floating around. They have to take over some key committees. And I am told that is part of the reason why they asked for an adjournment to Tuesday. Ordinarily, they have to come today on Friday, come and take business statement and all the other things. They've opted to go on Tuesday, and they say they're going to consult their flag bearer party leadership on certain key configurations, because they admit that they just have about 4 weeks to be majority, but they say they are going to make the most out of this. And Okudjota Blackwell is excited. You know what the crusade has been on. He says he can't wait for them to take over some of the key committees and lead proceedings.
So let me ask two things. First of all, what would you say is the biggest thing that the new majority could do in the time they have?
I think the only things they can do is to stall government's agenda that they have been opposed to, because there's not enough time to do a lot of private members' bill that can get to the desk of the president in time before this Parliament expires. The jury is out still there. The jury is still out there as to whether or not private members' bill can alter certain things like a levy, for instance. And the constitutional provision says you can't introduce a private members' bill that imposes a charge on the consolidated fund or that introduces a tax except by reduction. So there are those who believe that you can reduce a tax by a private members' bill. The lawyers will argue over that. But even if you pass the legislation that's a reduced e-levy to 0.001%, and then it went to the desk of the president has 7 days to signal whether he will sign it or not. The president can decide to give it to the Council of State for 30 days. In 30 days' time, you are in December, you're going to do election. You come back, the president says, I won't sign. He can refer the bill back to Parliament, then Parliament would have to work on it for about 30 days. So I think Ablakwa yesterday in an interview with us was making a point that, listen, they can't wait to reset Ghana in the next parliament. I think he's setting the expectation just too
bit high
because there's really very little you can do.
What about the big Geiger counter shifting events like impeachment?
Yeah. Haruna Idrisu spoke to you guys on SMS and said that when the House resumes, he's going to move impeachment proceedings. That they can do. They can start the process for impeachment. They can get at least they can get the motions and other things running. Truth is, they don't have enough time. Like I said again, Parliament per its calendar is expected to sit for 4 weeks. Maximum by the end of or middle of November, they should be going back to campaign. In fact, MPs are livid. Some of them say the campaign in their constituencies are hot. They can't be sitting in Accra between Monday and Friday, and even the MPP proposed for them to sit on Saturdays and Sundays sometimes, so that certain allies can mature. So they don't have the time on their side, but they can start the process. However, they can get the motion, they can get it to the Chief Justice, a prima facie case can be made, it can come. At least I'm not sure the president will want impeachment albatross around his neck just when it's about to go, or even if they do vote on it and they lose, at least the record will be that there was a impeachment proceedings.
To them, the advantage will be in the creation of a record.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And could I mean interesting stuff? I mean, where do we draw the line when it comes to what the proceedings says and the law? Now you decided that you're going to boycott sitting. What about cooperation as well?
I guess that is the point that people will be asking.
So
that listen, you are now in the minority.
Yeah.
You go back and sit on the table with these new majority MPs and say, listen, these are key government business. You can always strike a compromise. And we know in Parliament it's almost...
No, but the thing here is that in the first place, that action that shifts the House is being contested
in court.
So when you go and even sit down with them, then it defeats the original argument or the original posturing that you have even questioned. That's something that... what is the law saying about the fact that if you boycott sitting, that it also lead to them not cooperating with them? So do what you have to do. We as government, or that is government, is not going to cooperate with them, and let's see what they want to do.
But I think if that happens, the biggest loser will be the government. You have about 10 bills that you want to get through. The minority are not going to do the bills for you unless they have their own interest in those bills. If they don't have an interest, they'll leave it and say, we are hoping to win. If we win and we come and we are interested, we'll bring it back. So those are issues that the government would have to sort out. I think there will be major conversation going on between the president and the majority side about this. Yesterday was cabinet meeting. Are you going to boycott this for 3 weeks if the Supreme Court has not dealt with this? If the Supreme Court does not deal with this matter before the 7th December election and Parliament goes on break indefinitely, would that mean you've boycotted Parliament entirely? And who suffers the most? The government. You don't get... There are bills that are tied to the IMF condition. There's EPA Act that is being considered currently. It is tied to the IMF deal. There are a number of those bills that are tied to certain deals. This $250 million loan that you need so much. So I guess conversation would have to happen, and I suspect there will be a seismic change in that position.
Now let's talk about the Supreme Court and what effect it has, if any, on what's going on. Well, first of all, I know that those of you in the legal spheres will forever debate what an injunction means and whether or not it actually stops people from acting. But let's assume that Supreme Court, in a surprising turn of events, decides to rule quickly. And their ruling is different from the speaker's. Bearing in mind that this is a speaker who has once in the past declared that the Supreme Court can't tell Parliament what to do. What do we expect? Are we all sitting and expecting that if the Supreme Court has a different ruling, Bagbin will accept it?
I think Bagbin will be in a difficult position, but he will have to comply, because if you don't comply with the decision of the Supreme Court, that is like overthrowing the Constitution itself. Some people say that's treason. And I know he had strong views on whether or not first and second deputy speakers had the right to vote. In fact, he ruled that deputy speakers, when they preside, do not have the right to vote. And then the Justice Abdullah case went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled. Bagbin at the time wasn't so well. He was in Dubai. He put out a very terse Facebook post that tore into the Supreme Court, that tore into the court. So that issue is still there. But I suspect he will disagree, and he will come out quite forcefully, because the Constitution is really clear. If you look at Article 130, it is in the exclusive purview of the Supreme Court to interpret the Constitution.
Yeah.
And now rival meanings have been put on Article 97 G and H, and the NPP are going to court on that. I think the biggest headache for the NPP, who are now in the minority, is not so much about whether or not Bagbe will comply. Because if Bagbe does not comply and Parliament does not sit and it hangs in the balance till Parliament adjourns, they can say that we're majority throughout. Okay, I suspect their biggest hurdle now to cross is to how to get the Supreme Court to sit on this early now. They can go by way of an abridgment of time and get a court to expedite the processes. But the Supreme Court has been in a tight fix. Remember, Sam George and co have been making a lot of noise about the anti-LGBTQ bill.
That's right.
Which has been in Parliament, which has been in the Supreme Court since early May.
Yeah.
The court has not dealt with it yet. In fact, in the Daily Guide, they are ordering Parliament to file their cases in 7 days. The minority and the NDC and these allied groups say the Supreme Court is stalling because they want to do the government a favor. So the Supreme Court itself, although sometimes should not be open to political considerations, will sit back and say, if we are to grant a motion to expedite this case, how would that look on us when there are other matters, for instance, that are pending? But I don't want to be in the shoes of Madame Gertrude Tokono and the court. This is a very big matter that they have to declare, they have to decide on. So it's quite a big issue that they have to deal with, and I don't want to be in their shoes, Kojo.
I can imagine.